The topic of dust collection can be one of the most controversial and hardest to sift through to find exactly the machine and setups that you need. This one really sucks. Let me tell you why. This is the Oneida SuperCell dust collector. It has 3 motors that combine for a 5 horsepower total overall package and has some seriously nice features. Just to be clear, I do have a working relationship with Oneida. I sought them out about this machine and we are working together on some content like this, but just wanted to let you know. One of the biggest selling features of this one and what caught my eye is it's the only dust collection system on the market with high enough static pressure to effectively evacuate all the dust at the source from any tool with a port that's 1 inch all the way to 5 inches. Oneida has a really good video on their channel kind of describing the different ways that they accomplished this and comparing to other machines that are on the market. I'll link it down below. In some cases, this produces almost double the CFM as you start to reduce that hose size, which is pretty significant. They've also done some serious tests with 100 feet of hose that's 4 inch, collecting it off of a planer, and it got all of the chips as they were planing wood with 100 feet. I would say that's pretty impressive. Some other general overall features that I like of this one, this particular one is on a roll around cart, which I can show you in a second. It has a smaller collection bin that I'm going to be upgrading to a larger one when I get it kind of more permanently mounted. Very easy to change the bin. There's a really cool cleaning feature that this dust collector has, and all you do is hit this little switch here after you close the blast gate, and it basically reverses itself and cleans out the entire filter. That way you can get back to work and not have any suction loss. That's a big thing to me. On my previous dust collector, it was really a pain to clean. They did not have a good way to clean it. It actually had a separate bin where some of the dust that would get through the filter would fall down into the bin that you had to clean. This one is all stacked in a row, so it will just fall down into your same collection bin, which I think is a positive. A few of the other features that drew me to this machine was the small overall footprint. I'm in kind of a decent medium-sized shop, I would say, but I've crammed way too many big tools in it. So it's 21 by 21, and I have a lot of big machines in here. So I needed something that had a smaller footprint, but could still get the job done. And just because this thing is sitting on a cart like this with a smaller bin, don't think that it can't be upgraded to something larger. Like I mentioned, I've already got a 55-gallon drum for it, and I'm gonna be setting this up more permanently as I go. This is basically the mounting bracket. You just take it off of the cart and install a different bin on there. You can install hard piping, whatever you want to do. I do think the assembly of this machine is a good bit less than, say, my previous one, the Laguna. I can't speak directly to that because I got this one and worked out a deal with them from a trade show and brought it home already assembled. But my friend Drew that I do a podcast with, he did assemble his and showed all of those steps in a video he did about a SuperCell a couple years ago. Go check that out. I'll leave a link to it below. As you start exploring and continuing in your woodworking journey, you're going to discover that you need dust collection. For me, that started out as actually another Oneida product. I used a shop vac with a bucket and a Dust Deputy Cyclone on it. It worked really well for quite a while for me, but as I got more tools, I needed a better and bigger solution. So at that point, I moved to a 1.5 horsepower single stage. You've probably seen them with the bag on the top and the bag on the bottom. Those are single stage dust collectors. It did okay. I still used the Dust Deputy on my miter saw, so that did pretty well there. And I just kept accumulating these different kind of solutions. One of them was a separate dust extractor for like my random orbit sander or that type of thing. But I really think this SuperCell, if you look at this video early enough in your journey and could decide that this is the one that you want, might be able to replace multiples of those machines because it can do all of that for pretty much any of your tools. After the single stage dust collector, I moved to a 2-stage Cyclone That was the Laguna P-Flux 3, and it was a good dust collector for me for quite a while, but it did not do well when you reduce that hose size down to try to use it on like the oscillating spindle sander, which has a 2.5-inch port, or random orbit sander, or my Festival Domino, which has a 1.5-inch port. This machine can actually still function on those, and I'll show you that in a little bit. So this is the next evolution of what I have going on. I think it's gonna serve me really well, but I wanted to point those things out to you because if you're early on in what you're learning in woodworking and you're starting to acquire tools and this and that, this might be a machine that you want to look into to find out more details. It might be able to solve everything that you need. Obviously, I know there are a lot of machines out there, and that's part of what's so confusing about dust collection is there's a seemingly endless amount of them and all kinds of different terms and terminology thrown around. So I'm trying to simplify some of that for you. I think especially with this one on the rolling cart, you would be able to just put it in your shop and get up and going with dust collection really fast. So what all machines will I be using this on? Well, my table saw will definitely get use from it. The planer that I'm standing in front of now will be using it. I will be hooking it to my random orbit sander and even the CNC once I get a dust boot and stuff to hook it to. I will be using it on the oscillating spindle sander, my drum sander over there. I'll be using it on my large 17-inch bandsaw, and I probably won't use it on the drill press. I don't even use that machine very often. And same goes for the lathe. I have a MIDI lathe that I don't turn very often. And for the times that I do, if it's decent outside, I can wheel it outside and turn right there, or just turn and make a mess and sweep it up after. It's not that big a deal. Eventually, I've got a jointer that I'm gonna be restoring, so that will be another machine that will be using this dust collector as well. Oh, and I want to be able to sweep or vacuum the floor with it. That's really important to me, is to keep this clean. This is my garage, and I don't want to constantly be tracking sawdust back into the house when I'm coming out here. So what are some of the features? I've already mentioned a few of them. One of them is that it has this clean feature on the filter. It's really fantastic. You close the blast gate right at the cyclone and you hit the little whammy bar and it cleans the filter basically with itself. It uses the machine to clean the filter, which I think is fantastic. Then if it drops stuff down in your bin, it's just in your normal dust bin and you empty it. I somehow misplaced the bags that came with mine. This is the 14-gallon collection bin, so I don't have any of the bags that go in it. You can use bags with this machine. It actually has a negative pressure hose that makes it where it's not gonna like suck up and wrinkle up your bag. But obviously it can be used without the bag, which is what I'm doing. And you just have to turn off that airflow valve or whatever if you're not using a bag. It also has this cool red light thing that can show you when it's full. Maybe you have your headphones on or ear protection, whatever, and you can't tell that the machine, that your bin is full. It'll actually sit there and flash at you, telling you that it's full. You can adjust how sensitive that is, but I think that's a cool feature. I'm gonna probably mount it on the wall where I can see it from my table saw, which is where I do a lot of cutting. Like I mentioned before, this thing is on wheels. Mine has a cart with it, but the collection bin also has wheels, so it's very easy to, this particular one's small enough, I could wheel it over to my other garbage bin, dump the sawdust in there, and take it out to the trash as needed. It also comes with a remote control, and I don't have a video shot of that because, again, that must have gotten misplaced in the shipment and I didn't notice it until today. So I'll have to pick up another one of those, but this machine does come with a remote. Clip it to your belt or your apron and it will be really convenient. No excuse to not turn on your dust collector. I alluded to the piping that this one uses a few minutes ago, but let me tell you a little bit more about that. This one actually uses a special type of flex hose that's a little different than most of the others that you've seen that are very flexible. This one's a bit more rigid. It still has a wire incorporated like many others do to help keep down static, but it's very versatile. You can also use different fittings that you can't on some other machines. Some other dust collectors lose a significant amount of CFM as you start to make 90-degree turns or something like that. It doesn't bother this one. They recommend using T-joints or hard elbows. It's still gonna be fine. Obviously, there are some parameters. You can't run 1,000 feet of something. It still has limits, but it seems to be much more versatile as far as the different types of turns and joints that you can use. As mentioned, it can also be choked down to a 2.5 inch to use with typical desktop type things like sanders or those type of things, or a cleaning kit for the floor, which is what I got, so I can vacuum up the floor. Then it can be choked down a little bit more, even to 1.5 inch, and use it with a domino or a random orbit sander or some tool like that. Those ports are really small, and many other large dust collectors just can't do that.
I need to adjust the sensitivity of the sensor. As you can see, the red light is already going off, and this is the first thing that I've run through it, but it is adjustable, just know that.
That worked really well. Just planed this a few times, piece of white oak, and it got it all. Nice.
As I mentioned earlier, I don't use the drill press that often, so having something like this to just clean it up quickly after I use it for a time or two will work just fine. Before I unhooked the old one, I tried some suction tests. This is just a solid piece of about 1.5 inch thick cherry, and it struggled to kind of lift one edge of it and couldn't really do it. Then I moved on to the SuperCell after I got it all hooked up, and as you can see, I have a ton of hose length going on here, and it still handled this quite easily. Next up was the drum sander test. This thing can really spit some dust everywhere, and it's that fine sanding dust that just gets on absolutely everything, and it collected it all. I never really had a great solution for this oscillating spindle sander, and because of that, I would often use it, just turn it on quickly, and dust would go places, and that's just not good. This thing handles it really well. There's a little bit that ends up on the table, but that's more about the tool design than it is about the dust collection. But look at how much it's grabbing even from the front side of this thing and sucking it underneath. This bandsaw actually has two ports. It has an upper port and a lower port, and I was only hooking the dust collection up to the upper port in this one. I can imagine it would do even better to remove all of that dust, even from in the cabinet, when you hook it to the lower port as well. I call this good at the table saw. You can see some dust flying up, especially with me wearing this black hoodie, but without having an overarm dust collection setup, I expect to see way more than this usually. Obviously, if you're cutting right on the edge, you usually see more of that because the blade is not buried in the wood. Dust collection on a sander is very important. For the first few years, I did not have anything like this. I have been using some dust extractors that are separate little machines that you hook just basically for this. And this thing collected every bit as much as those and had actually more suction. If you can see in front of where I'm sanding, I forgot to turn on the dust collector before I started, and there is some dust on this sanding pad down below here. Well, I actually used it when I turned the sander off to just suck up that dust by touching it to it, and the holes in the sander actually collected everything that was on the surface. The Domino's performance is dependent upon you actually extracting the chips and evacuating it all out of those mortises, and this did just fine. The funny thing is, I could not find my adapter to hook to this because it's a slightly different size than my sander was, so the connection hose was actually a little bit loose, and it still worked. One thing I really do like is this smaller bin. It is easily able to be taken over to a garbage can, dumped in there, and that way when the garbage collection day comes, I can bag this thing up and set it out.
I always want to try to do better with dust collection, and I think this machine will help me do just that. Is this the dust collector for you? Well, only you can make that call. I don't know. No, this is not the most comprehensive video ever made about the SuperCell. There are more technical details out there, and there are other review videos. This isn't really a review video. I just wanted to show some of the features that caught my eye and make it seem like you could get set up really fast with dust collection in your shop. If I knew about this machine years ago when I was doing some of those upgrades, I might have tried to aim for it. So there have been many things as I've been woodworking that I see other woodworkers have or whatever, I kind of go, oh, that's the thing that I want. I want this to serve as that. I want to show you enough about it that you consider it as an option. Maybe it'll save you some money to keep from buying multiple machines and upgrading. Just go ahead and get the machine that will work really well right out of the box. I would put this one on your radar as you search. It should be in the running. Hopefully you're a little less intimidated by some of the things that you see when you're out there searching for dust collector options. I know it can be intimidating when I look through all of that stuff, and I hope I alleviated some of that. See ya.